Hi, my name is Tara Alexandra, and I'm the host of Michigan Entrepreneur, where we feature businesses from startup to stellar. Today, I have as my special guest John Carmichael, who is the CEO of GT Independence. Welcome to the program.
Thanks, Tara. It's great to be here.
Well, it's really exciting to have you because you are a really big and established business here in the state of Michigan. But before we jump into finding out more about GT Independence, which is a family owned business, which is fantastic, why don't you tell me a little bit about your background?
Sure. So I was born and raised in Sturgis, Michigan. I graduated from Sturgis High School in 1995. I attended college at Tri-State University, which is now known as Trine University, and received a bachelor's degree in business administration. But I think a big part of what defines me is uh, my uh, my relationship with my older brother, who was born with a developmental disability, and my relationship with my family, because we've spent Ben's whole life advocating for him and trying to help him live a life where he can be included. And that's really what led me to begin GT Independence.
And so when did you start this business? When was it?
In 2004, the
Hmm.
business started, which is about 16 years ago. We started the business with my family. So my father and my mother and the rest of my family began the business. And we began the business because we knew of a different way to help people with disabilities and long-term care needs
Hmm.
have the kind of life that you and I would both like to live. So my brother Ben, his life sort of traces the way that we've served people with developmental disabilities in this country for years. He was, as a young person, he went to live at an institution in Wisconsin called St. Coletta, a very well-known institution. And for most of his childhood, he lived there because that was really the best option that was available for him at the time. In the late 90s, the United States Supreme Court issued the very famous Olmstead decision, which said that people who have disabilities or long-term care needs should be allowed to live as part of their communities in the least restrictive environment possible. And that set off a wave of deinstitutionalization in this country. And Ben, at that time, was coming home from the institution. And he lived back in our small rural community Sturgis, in what's called a group home. And that wasn't quite right for Ben. Ben was a young man and he had a lot of energy and a lot of desire, like anybody in their 20s would have, to get out and explore the world. And that didn't really fit with the program there. So ultimately, Ben was able to live in a home of his own where he chose the people who would support him to live day to day. And we took that experience and turned it into GT Independence.
So, John, before that passing of that legislation, were group homes not even a thing then? Did they come out of that legislation so that people could be back integrated into the communities that they may have been born in or raised in?
So the Supreme Court decision did set off the implementation of deinstitutionalization. So after that decision, there was an entire infrastructure set up to help people come out of institutions and to live as part of their communities. We have the community mental health system in the state of Michigan now. There are 43 community mental health authorities in Michigan that are charged with doing this, with serving people with disabilities and long-term care needs in their communities. Likewise, the state has the My Choice Waiver Program, which is a part of Medicaid. Again, designed to help people live independently in their communities rather than to be in a nursing home or other institution.
So certainly there's, obviously they follow all these things through in terms of studies and such. And so what are some of the things you can speak to in terms of quality of life and just overall health of the population now that they are moving things down to the community level rather than isolating people in institutions that might be far from their loved ones?
Certainly, certainly. And that's a really great question. And it's a really important question to be asking right now at this very time as we come out of the COVID pandemic and we start to think about how we help people with disabilities and long-term care needs to live a life of their choosing. So there's information that says first, because most of these services are paid for by the public, by public dollars. First, home and community-based services rather than institutional services cost about a third to the taxpayer. So that's really important. Less infrastructure and it is required to serve people in their home and community. And the good news is that's where they want to be served. There's a statistic out there that says 70% of people, if given the choice, would choose to age in their homes and in their communities rather than in a nursing home. So it absolutely is the way that people want to receive services. And there's lots of data, including studies by Robert Wood Johnson, that says people have less incidence of negative health effects, fewer unmet needs, less incidence of stress to family caregivers when they have the choice over who provides their service and where they receive their services. So there's a massive benefit to our society to serve people in their homes and communities. And the current administration has recognized that, and the legislative packages that are coming out of the president's office now have a significant investment in home and community-based services, which is just a fantastic thing.
And I also think what's so important about it is not just the saving of the expenses, but just to integrate people with their loved ones. I mean, it's so important that we stay with friends and family because there's so much healthful benefits from that. And to share people's gifts. I mean, people have gifts no matter where they are in terms of their health to share with others, and to have these people in our families and near us is so important. So now at GT Independence, what are some of the types of services, or the arc of services that you provide that serve people so that they can get that independence that they want by being in their own community rather than being in some other type of situation?
Thanks for asking. Yes. So GT Independence provides somewhat a unique service. There's this concept called self-determination. Of course, that's an old concept that applies to a lot of different areas of society. Self-determination was the reason we fought the Revolutionary War. But in the context of people who need services, it means having the choice over who comes through your front door to provide very intimate personal assistance services. And the way that we accomplish this is to help people actually become their own employers and to hire their own personal assistants. And this is how people really benefit from home and community-based services, because they get to choose who that worker is. It's not a stranger. It might be somebody that they've interviewed and selected based on their own characteristics. And what we do in our role, and we're known as a financial management service in our circles, but what it means is we help people become an employer. We actually register them as an employer with federal and state taxing authorities. And then we conduct all of the necessary paperwork for them to legally and appropriately hire their workers. We also collect timesheets and issue payments like a staffing agency might. And we also assist folks with being good employers and complying with Medicaid program rules. About 98% of the people that we serve receive services through Medicaid. We're in 13 states and we serve about 30,000 Medicaid beneficiaries.
Wow, that's very impressive. What a unique way of approaching this. So it's really empowering people. It's not just giving them independence by giving them services. You're empowering them to make their own decisions, which really steps people up to a different way of showing up in the world. So that type of empowerment, I mean, maybe not everybody can make those decisions on their own, but at least they've got more choice in the matter instead of just being sent some random person that they maybe didn't really want. So in terms of, do you have like categories of services that you offer? So is it kind of like a la carte that people select, or is there a program that people purchase and certain things are included in it? How does that work?
Sure. So I think we have to talk about how Medicaid works in the United States right now. Medicaid in general is a plan and an agreement really between the state and the federal government about how we deliver services to people who have disabilities, long-term care needs, or may meet certain income criteria, people who are lower income. And so traditionally, what has happened is states and the federal government have made adjustments to that agreement, and we call those waivers. But those adjustments are special things that we do to test uh, ideas like home and community-based services. And so a state will design the services that are available for individuals. And these types of services can range from vocational services to help people learn how to acquire employment and to be successful in their work. They can be services like respite, which allow family members to have a break from being the primary caregiver, or community inclusion services, which help people actually participate fully in their community. Most of these services require a staff person to deliver the services, and that's where we come in.
And so you are, so when they are serving as the person is serving as the employer, you're bringing in a pool of people that they can select from and look at their characteristics and see if they are a good fit for, like, can they help me in these areas? Are they certified in, different types of medical types of care and things? Is that how you're doing it? Are you funneling people in front of them so that they can select from people?
Kind of. I think the way I would describe it is we are helping the person to recruit, select, hire, and even fire the person that they want to employ.
No, I like
So
that part.
that's right. Well, that's where the empowerment comes from.
Yeah.
If the person walking through your front door, if you have the power to fire them, they're going to be beholden to you and not to some third party or some agency that is not as connected to the care arrangement. That really is the beauty of a self-directed service arrangement. So we're helping people prepare interview questions. We're helping people source employees. As you know, or as you may know, there is a massive shortage of caregivers, people who can provide this type of service. There is quite a bit more demand for personal assistants and in-home caregivers than there are caregivers. And one of the things that this does is it brings more people into the caregiving profession, which is something that's absolutely needed.
I
But
actually did not know that. I did not know there was a shortage of caregivers. I really thought that was quite a robust area. In fact, I did not know that. Is that like across the board, like nationally?
absolutely, there is what I would call a caregiver crisis in this country right now. And I think there are a lot of factors that contribute to that. The wages that are paid to in-home support staff are very low, some of the lowest wages that are paid to any type of worker in this country. The demand for in-home supportive services is increasing at an exponential rate, both with the shift away from institutions to in-home services and the demographic changes that are happening with baby boomers and just our population in general. So the next 20 or 30 years in this country is going to be about how do we take care of each other? And some of the efforts that are being proposed at the federal level and at the state level are efforts to help bring caregivers into this, to increase this workforce. And there's things like increasing pay, and there are things like helping caregivers really define their profession as something that requires skill and ability, and to provide a robust training and certification infrastructure around that.
And with that, they would actually be able to, I mean, I don't think you need all those things to actually create a labor union, but I assume they are not in a union of any sort.
They can be. There are unions who do represent caregivers.
Mm-hmm.
And there, that certainly is a consideration, when we're talking about, wages and benefits that caregivers can receive.
Now, I know you mentioned that you're in 13 different states, including our great state of Michigan, where you are based, your headquarters. And how do you determine which states you move into? Because I guess you have to be strategic because you have to build your infrastructure to support that. But how do you determine the next state that you can enter into so that you can continue to offer these services and expand across the nation?
So, I think we have to go back to the company's culture, our mission and our core values. Really, any major decision that the company makes, the first thing we ask ourselves is, does it align with our mission and core values? And our mission is to help people live a life of their choosing, regardless of age or ability. And so when we look for a new state to enter, we look for a state that will allow GT independents to deliver the services according to their values, where there's a fit in that way. And we really examine the opportunity along those lines. You know, one of the things that's a major philosophy for me as an entrepreneur or as a business leader is that uh, the purpose of GT Independence is to deliver value to its stakeholders. And the byproduct of delivering value to the diverse set of stakeholders that we interact with is profitability and sustainability. So if you focus on delivering value, that means delivering value to the people you serve, delivering value to the healthcare system, delivering value to your employees, then you produce an arrangement that ultimately yields in a sustainable venture.
And going along those lines, what makes it work is all the different types of service offerings that you have. What have you seen in the evolution of your service offerings? Like, are you continually like looking for new types of services to add, or are you staying with that core that works? And if you are evolving them, like what new have you done, or what's on the horizon, if you can share?
Sure, I'm happy to. So to answer your question, throughout the history of the company, we've seen incredible growth. In 16 years, I think our average growth rate is something like 20%. So we've always been in this environment of tremendous growth. And I think that's a result, I hope it's a result of the quality of services that we're delivering, but I think it's also a result of the demographic factors we're facing and the shift towards home and community-based services. So we really haven't had time to try and broaden the service offering. But what we have done and what we focused on is increasing the level of service that's offered within this area of self-directed services. So I'll give you two examples. We focused on in-home enrollments initially as an innovation because we saw that people, actually to become an employer, there are a number of tax forms that you have to fill out and they can look scary. And so we saw that there was a tremendous need for at the beginning in the enrollment process to make people feel comfortable with actually becoming an honest to goodness employer. The second thing that we said is we have to stay up to date with technology. There was a recent law passed in 2016 called the 21st Century Cures Act, and it requires electronic visit verification in homes. So people have to record electronically when they come and go from a provider's home. We decided to develop our own tool to comply with that law because we wanted to make sure we could design it in a way that our customers could use well and be effective using. So I think, that's really where our innovation has come from, adding technology and making the somewhat narrow service that we provide the best it can be.
So going very deep with your idea.
Deep, yes, rather than wide.
So, with you being, involved in this company for nearly 17 years, how have you had to change in your approach or your leadership style or just who you are as a person? How have you evolved during the course of this time of well over a decade of being involved with this company that your family started, all of you started?
Uh, there's so many ways I could answer that question. It truly has been a journey. So when in 2004, I was in my 20s, and all I knew is that I wanted to create a successful business venture. So I was really motivated to do that. And of course, in the beginning, and I think any entrepreneur would say this, it was long nights. It was every possible task that the company had to perform was being performed by me or a member of my family. And so you get ingrained in this, and I think the challenge and the real opportunity for growth as the company grows is learning to give those things up, learning to identify that the folks who come to work for you are the ones who will carry on that work, and that if you don't simply get out of their way and let them be the best people they can be, then the company won't grow. And so that takes a lot of personal introspection, a lot of personal reflection in order to sort of fulfill that. And that was an incredible challenge in the beginning. And it continues. We've been lucky to have just fantastic people on our team. And we're lucky to be in an industry where the first thing that people get out of their job is to feel good at night when they go home because they're helping people who really need help. And so our employees are incredibly passionate. I think, at this time in the company, it's about helping people, sort of almost temper their passion and enthusiasm, and make sure that that they're growing kind of in the way that I had an opportunity to.
Yeah, and you have over 300 employees right now, correct?
I believe it's over 400. Yes.
Over 400? Yeah, that's a lot. That's huge for a family business. Now, where do you see your company going and growing in the coming years? Describe like what you think that will look like.
Sure. So a big thing that's very important for us at this juncture in the company's development is making sure that the strategy that we've established is clear and that it involves input from all levels of the company. So, so we go through a really intensive strategic planning process. And in fact, our strategic year starts today, April 1st. And so we've just completed a process where we've identified, refined the long-term vision. We have a 10-year goal and a 25-year goal. 10-year goal is to be a national leader in self-directed services. And our 25-year goal is everybody in the country can self-direct. So that's our North Star, Tara. And we just break it down quarter by quarter, the tasks that we have to do to get to our North Star, and we make sure that we can communicate. So what do we want to accomplish? In the next 3 years, we want to be serving more states, serving more people. We want to have a seat at the table in the national policy discussions, because our perspective, I think, adds value to the discussions that policymakers are having about how to tackle this really big challenge of caring for one another in the coming years and decades. And we want to continue to innovate and add technology to the services that we offer.
How do you get the word out about what you're doing? I mean, I know you can certainly make connections with folks in Washington and share your story and share your successes because that's important so that they know you're around and things like that. So from the political standpoint, those types of connections are extremely important to people who are helping make policy in these areas. But how do you get the the ideas, the service offerings, all these things communicated to people in the community? Because like I didn't know about your company until I made a connection with your connection. I didn't know about it, but it's like this is amazing, and I'm so glad. I feel so much more informed about my community and what's available, and I've been telling other people about it because I really do think this is amazing because I didn't know about this kind of thing. But how are you sharing that story? How are you getting out there?
First of all, we have that experience this all the time. How come I didn't know about this? That question we've heard so many times, and in a way, it's frustrating because it feels like you're not doing enough to communicate. Exactly. So it's such a great question. I think from the perspective of an entrepreneur, a business leader, you have to understand the importance of marketing and the purpose of marketing. Marketing, for probably the layperson, is just a tool to get more sales, right? To drive revenue. But it's really so much more than that. It's about establishing, defining, and communicating your brand, helping the rest of the world hear your story. And it has impact well beyond sales or revenue. It helps your employees understand what their purpose is and be more engaged in their work. It helps the communities that you serve and the communities where your employees are to understand the importance of your company. And it helps people do just exactly what you ask, learn that this is available. So we've tried to focus, especially recently, on building our presence on social media, speaking at events where we have stakeholders who might be concerned to hear our story. And I think a marketing professor told me a long time ago, marketing is telling people what you do over and over and over again.
Right, because they'll keep new people will hear it and other people will hear it in a different way. Yeah, because the story is so important. And I think what's so touching about this is that it comes from a personal need. It comes from a family, of loving your brother and creating something out of that love that is now serving people, 30,000 plus people in 13 states. I mean, that's, you know, there's a reason for all of this. And I think people really resonate with that. And to me, like, the more I hear about this, the more interested I am in this, because this is amazing. As I see, people in our family, relatives and such, being in things that I didn't really agree with or like, and seeing that there are other options and empowerment options, because that's where it is. That will help people live longer, live a quality life. And to me, like, that's just amazing. It's amazing. If there was something that you could say if there was a word that you would say that kind of encompasses what you do, if you had to say, what is it in a nutshell that you do for the people that you end up serving, what would kind of be that nutshell word or phrase, or what would that be?
Self-determination. We go back to self-determination is the kernel of everything that we're about. So that means people getting to make choices about who comes to their front door. That means our employees, yeah, having the independence to make the decisions that to help people. That it pervades every part of the company's existence. Self-determination is the king.
And the interesting thing is that word in and of itself is completely powerful. The word self, determination, and together, it just, to me, like, I feel that right in my heart because that is like, it's core to who we are. I mean, it really is. So I know we have just about a minute left, and you are an entrepreneur of many, many years, and many more to go as you serve with GT Independence and spreading the word out nationally. What is your one piece of advice to entrepreneurs based upon whatever comes to mind?
I think the thing I would say is that by far your most important asset are the people who have come to work for you. It is the absolute most important thing you can do to share your purpose with them and get out of their way and let them realize that purpose. People come to work, they have to make money when they come to work, but they wouldn't trade money for purpose. That's been my experience.
Wow, that's really important. They wouldn't trade money for purpose. Really well said. I want to thank you so much, John Carmichael, a CEO of GT Independence, for being a guest today on Michigan Entrepreneur and sharing your personal family story and the company that you've built as a family to serve people far and wide.
It's been my pleasure, Tara. Thank you.
Absolutely. If you'd like more information about our program, please visit us at www.michiganentrepreneurtv.com. Please join us again in the future when I interview another enterprising entrepreneur. Until then, wishing you the best of business.